Hello everybody, my name is Mike Gaudette and welcome back to another installment of Top 5 Albums, the series where I walk you through my 5 favorite albums from every year. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the year 1988, another great year for music, and now that we're getting closer to the 90s, we're starting to see the emergence of new styles that would become very prevalent in the coming years with genres like shoegaze and grunge, and this year produced countless classic records that illustrate a very exciting and very transformative time for music. So without further ado, here are my top 5 favorite albums of 1988, starting with number 5. Coming in at number 5, we have Isn't Anything by My Bloody Valentine. This is the debut record to come from this legendary English rock band and one of the pioneers of the shoegaze genre. And prior to this album, they had released a few EPs where you can hear them dabbling in some different styles and trying to find their sound. And on their third EP, they had settled into a noisier sound which would combine elements of noise rock, dream pop, and shoegaze. And then they would release this debut studio album a couple of months after the release of that EP. And although My Bloody Valentine is most well known for their 1991 release Loveless, I think this record produced music that is equally as awesome and has some truly fascinating sounds that are incredibly ahead of their time for the year 1988. This album builds off of the styles that they had established on their previous EP with a very raw and lo-fi production style and all of the classic characteristics of a shoegaze record with the very loud and reverb-laden guitar parts, as well as the obscured vocal parts that can oftentimes be buried in the mix. And it features some very cool and beautiful guitar parts with these exotic riffs and chord progressions that create these really beautiful soundscapes. The album is 12 tracks long and delivers a nice palette of sounds that are mostly centered in a very dark and dreary sort of tone, with a couple of tracks that balance it out and provide a little bit more brightness in the mood. And for me, this record contains my number 1 favorite My Bloody Valentine track, which is titled Lose My Breath. That is one of the darkest and most terrifying songs that I have ever heard. It utilizes this unorthodox alternate tuning in the guitars, which allows Kevin Shields to play these really dark and ominous chord voicings that are very disorienting and have a lot of dissonant tones within them. And it's juxtaposed with a beautiful second section that goes into some really melodic territories that are very pretty. And it's a really fascinating contrast between the first and second section. And my other 2 favorites on this album would actually be the 2 tracks that follow that, Cupid Come and When You Wake You're Still in a Dream. And this is one of those records where I do think the opening half is a bit stronger than the second half. All of my favorite songs happen within the first 6 tracks of the song listing, but if I had to pick a couple of favorites from the second half of the album, I would go with Sue Is Fine and You Never Should. So I think this is an incredible album on multiple different fronts. For the year 1988, I do not think you will be able to find another album that sounds anything like this. It was very innovative from a production, songwriting, and guitar standpoint, and it built the perfect foundation for them to continue to build off of and would lead to their second studio album Loveless, which is regarded as the poster boy for the shoegaze genre and is oftentimes regarded as the best shoegaze album of all time. And in my opinion, it is all thanks to this record and the EP that was released before it. So that is my number 5 album. Now on to number 4. Coming in at number 4 is Peep Show by Susie and the Banshees, a great record to come from this legendary English band's discography. And this is later into their discography, and it would be the first record where they are a quintet, with the addition of guitarist John Klein, as well as multi-instrumentalist Martin McCarrick. And I really like the addition of these new members because it allowed them to experiment more with different sounds and textures and really create some beautiful layering within these songs. And stylistically, I really like what they did on here, giving us a nice variety of different sounds, with some songs that are in more of a pop and alternative rock sort of realm, but also giving us a fair share of songs that are in that more stripped down, ambient, experimental sort of territory. And I think it offers the best of both worlds when it comes to where Susie and the Banshees were at this point stylistically within their discography. It's 10 tracks long with 5 songs on each side, and you hear that stylistic detour into the more poppy side right from the opening track of the record, record titled Peekaboo, and I think this is the perfect opening track. It kickstarts the album beautifully, and then from that point on, it is just one amazing song after the next. If I had to pick a couple of favorite songs from this record, I would have to go with Carousel, Scarecrow, and Turn to Stone. And another thing that I love about this record is the way that it closes with the track Rhapsody, ending things on a very dark and intense mood, which greatly contrasts the mood of the opening track of the record. And I think throughout this track listing, they just do a great job of delivering on all fronts with the combination of the alternative rock and poppy elements, but also definitely keeping some of the styles that were more reminiscent to the earlier part of their discography with the experimental, ambient, and gothic rock sounds. And I think it resulted in one of the best albums of the Siouxsie and the Banshees discography. And if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on their entire discography, I did a video ranking all of their studio albums, so be sure to check that out in the tier list playlist linked in the comments and the description if you are interested. So that is my number 4 album. Now on to number 3. Coming in at number 3 is Bug by Dinosaur Jr. This is my personal favorite record of the Dinosaur Jr. discography, and it would be the last album for quite some time to feature Lou Barlow, as there had been some tension within the group, and because of his departure, a lot of people regard this as the end to Chapter 1 of the Dinosaur Jr. sound, and I really love what they did on here, delivering an incredible batch of tracks that are centered within that alternative, indie, and noise rock sort of foundation, with lots of really beautiful melodies and awesome guitar parts, and the stylistic choices and mood shifts from track to track keep things very engaging. And I think this album offers the listener a little bit of every sound that Dinosaur Jr. has to offer, with tracks that are very melodic, as well as songs that are very peaceful and serene, but also having some tracks that are more hard-hitting and aggressive, and it makes for a very enjoyable listen. And when it comes to my favorite Dinosaur Jr. tracks, this album would definitely contain the largest amount of them, with tracks like No Bones, Yeah We Know, Pond Song, and Budge. And I love the way the album concludes with a very heavy and intense track titled Don't, which showcases some insane vocal work from Lou Barlow, and the perfect send-off song for the last studio record of Dinosaur Jr. that he would be on for quite some time. And just in general, I think this is Dinosaur Jr.'s most consistent album, and stylistically, I resonate with this side of their sound the most of any record in their discography. And if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on Dinosaur Jr.'s full discography, I did a video ranking all of their studio albums, so be sure to check that out in the tier list playlist linked in the comments and the description if you are interested. So that is my number 3 album. Now on to number 2. Coming in at number 2 is From Langley Park to Memphis by Prefab Sprout, an amazing record to come from this 80s sophistopop group, and the follow-up to their incredible 1985 record Steve McQueen, which actually made my number 1 spot for my favorite album of the year 1985. And on this record, they give us a continuation of the sound that was established on Steve McQueen, but I would say this record goes into more of a straight-ahead 80s pop sort of direction. The production on this record takes on more 80s characteristics, with the very big production style and the wide variety of different synth sounds. And when it comes to 80s pop, I think this record is about as good as it gets. Lots of catchy melodies, tasteful and feel-good grooves, beautiful instrumentations, lush and tasteful vocal harmonies, and all of the classic characteristics of a great Prefab Sprout record, with Paddy McAloon's very colorful note choices, as well as his very interesting and unorthodox chord progressions. It's 10 tracks long and delivers a beautiful palette of different sounds, with the catchy poppy flavors of The King of Rock and Roll and Hey Manhattan, the somber but groovy moods of I Remember That and Cars and Girls, the beautiful ballad Nightingales, which has some of my favorite chord progressions of any Prefab Sprout song, and I also love the eerie vibes of Knock on Wood, which provides a nice little detour to the later half of the record. If I had to pick a couple of favorites on here, I would go with Nightingales, The King of Rock and Roll, Hey Manhattan, and I Remember That. And it is yet again another incredible album from one of my favorite groups to come out of the decade of the 80s. And at this point in their discography, this is their 3rd studio album, and so far all 3 of their albums have made my top 5 list for each year that they were released. And if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on all of their studio albums, I did a video ranking all of them, so be sure to check that out in the tier list playlist linked in the comments and the description description if you are interested. So that is my number 2 album, and now for the grand reveal, here is my number 1 favorite album of 1988. Okay, coming in as my number 1 favorite album of 1988 is Daydream Nation by Sonic Youth. This is a legendary record that a lot of people regard as the best album of the Sonic Youth discography, and I definitely agree with that. It's a double album, and there is just so much depth to this record. It's one of those albums where every time I listen to it, I pick up on something new, and it's clear that at this point in their discography, the material was just pouring out of them. The songwriting is spectacular, and they deliver this great combination of so many different styles ranging from alternative rock, noise rock, experimental, post-punk, and art punk, and it's the perfect amalgamation of all of the different sounds that they had dabbled in up to that point in their discography, but is also a further evolution into some new territories. It's 12 tracks long, and I think every single track on this record keeps the listener on the edge of their seat, never knowing where any of these songs are going to end up. Oftentimes, a song might set up a certain melody or a riff or a chord progression, and then completely abandon it halfway through and go into these extended instrumental sections that can oftentimes be very ambient, and that was something that they had been doing more so in a live setting up to that point, and this was the first record where they really started incorporating some of those elements into these songs. And in addition to the amazing songwriting, I really love the guitar work all throughout this record, both from a sound and music theory perspective. There's lots of different interesting guitar effects being utilized, as well as some very unorthodox and dissonant guitar parts that can oftentimes have some harmonies that are very clashing and sometimes are even harmonized from a half step apart, which creates a lot of tension that I think sounds so cool. And those dissonant guitar harmonies would end up being something that is a staple of the Sonic Youth sound, and I love that side of their guitar writing so much. It's something that really separates them from a lot of other bands of their time. As far as favorite songs go, I really love every single song on this album, but if I had to pick a couple of favorites, I would have to go with Candle, Teenage Riot, Silver Rocket, Cross the Breeze, Kissability, and the entire trilogy on side 4, which I think is the perfect way to conclude this double album. And I'm pretty sure I just named half of the album right there for some of my favorite songs, so it goes to show you how hard it is to really narrow down this album because every single song is just a home run. And not only is it my favorite Sonic Youth album and my favorite album of 1988, but it is also one of my favorite double albums of all time as well. So it's a record that I hold in very high regard, and I think it's pretty hard to put anything else from the year 1988 up against this record. And if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on Sonic Youth's full discography, I did a video ranking all of their studio albums as well, so be sure to check that out in the tier list playlist, linked in the comments and the description if you are interested. So that is my number 1 album of 1988, and to review, at number 5 we had Isn't Anything by My Bloody Valentine, number 4 was Peep Show by Susie and the Banshees, number 3 was Bug by Dinosaur Jr., number 2 was From Langley Park to Memphis by Prefab Sprout, and number 1 was Daydream Nation by Sonic Youth. If you haven't heard any of these records and you check them out, please let me know your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear what you think, and please let me know what your top 5 favorite albums of 1988 are in the comments. I would love to see your lists. Alright, that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for my top 5 favorite albums of 1989. I'll see you then. Take care.